Information from that deadly Air India crash last month is shifting the focus to the senior pilot. The flight took off on June 12th, but just seconds later, it suddenly pitched down and crashed, killing more than 250 people. Now, black box information reportedly shows it was the captain who turned off switches that control the flow of fuel, essentially shutting down the engines. According to that report, the co-pilot was surprised at the move and then panicked. As it became clear the plane was going down, it's also still not clear what exactly caused the initial power loss that prompted the engines to fail and stall. The investigating bureau isn't expected to release the final report until next summer at the earliest.
A mass sick leave by the Air India crew post the crash. In fact, 112 pilots, they have taken sick leaves since that crash. And this is what the aviation minister, in fact, informed the parliament today, that there is a spike in pilot sick leaves after the crash.
Just 4 days after Flight 171 crashed in Ahmedabad, 51 commanders and 61 first officers called in sick. That's 112 pilots in total. And I have to say, for all those saying, don't think, don't speculate, the pilots themselves absolutely do need to think about their mental health. The pilots themselves absolutely do need to take a break if they need to. Let's face it, part of a commercial pilot's job is to rest, is to sleep, is to arrive back at the job fresh and ready for the next shift.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. According to the Times of India, in light of the tragedy, the Directorate General of Civil Aviation has reiterated its 2023 circular advising airlines to implement customized mental health training for crew and to ensure access to peer support programs, confidential, non-punitive systems designed to help flight crew cope with stress, anxiety, and trauma. In this analysis, I want to talk briefly about 3 aspects we still need to talk about. Firstly, why airplane crash investigations need to be urgent, as well as why they are so time critical. Second, my thoughts on why 112 Air India pilots took leave all in the same day. And then I also want to address a third aspect, Turkish Airline Flight 1951, which reveals yet another perspective on these air crash investigations. But before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, you can hit the thanks button and let's get started. So, 3 aspects we still need to talk about. Number 1, why airplane crash investigations need to be urgent and why they are so critical. The amazing thing about air travel and flight safety is that every time there's an incident, it is dealt with, investigated, but then the rest of the industry is essentially brought up to speed, which makes the entire industry safer. It's the same as with Tesla cars. At the end of a particular day, as far as I know, all of the data is uploaded to the mothership and improvements are made across all the vehicles. Of course, that is assuming the incidents are reported honestly and with transparency. I think it's clear from this case, from what we saw with Egypt Air, and from what we've seen with Boeing over the past few years, and with several other incidents, real transparency isn't always there. And you can imagine in a case like this, you really want transparency so that you can have proper lessons being learned. Personally, I don't think the right response to these incidents is to sue newspapers or to criticize the media or to argue about speculation, etc. I think the focus ought to be on finding out ASAP what really happened so that everyone is safe as possible as soon as possible. And if there is a lesson that needs to be learned, that it is learned. Do you agree? The real risk is that the reality of a crash, whatever it is hidden, is not talked about, or it's distorted, because if that's the case, then history is geared to repeat itself. This is why we need to know why, and we need to know sooner than later. Remember, when an aircraft breaks down, it doesn't just pull over to the side of the road, it's in the air. This is also why if a pilot breaks down, it's not quite as simple or as easy as pulling over either. He's in the air and he can't just get out of there.
Where flight duty time limitations or the number of hours that pilots and other crew members can work, those guidelines have actually been violated. There have been several concerns in recent times which have been raised by the regulator about FDTL, as it's known, flight duty time limitations, and whether Air India was following those guidelines or not.
Number 2, why 112 Air India pilots took leave all on the same day. Any thoughts about that? I think it's fantastic that this happened, the taking of leave, I mean. And also, I think actions speak louder than words. That response, 112 Air India pilots taking leave, tells you all you need to know. That effectively has been the response to this incident, not some bulletin about a glitch. And I hope that is quite clear now. And have a look at this article from The Hindu. The dark side of flying, fear of grounding deters pilots. The Air India crash aftermath reveals mental health challenges faced by pilots, prompting industry-wide changes and support initiatives. Well, whether Air India told its pilots to take a break or whether all of these pilots demanded to take one, I think it's pretty clear Air India know what's going on. You've just heard, I think, the group executives saying basically that their pilots have been working too hard and that there is room for improvement in this area.
Okay, good. I'm fly. I'm pilot.
So I think we need to remember that pilots are human beings. And I also think we need to remember that Air India do know the truth about Flight 171. The important thing isn't to make things more stressful for the pilots, but less so, which is why the conversation on pilot mental health is, I think, overdue. It shouldn't be taboo, and people shouldn't be defensive about it, and also shouldn't be about blaming, but simply figuring out what the truth is. We can also discuss this issue, I think, sensitively without it becoming a witch hunt or without people becoming defensive about it. I do think a medical checkup specifically to check stress levels may be part of the answer here. Perhaps these need to be more frequent in the summer months as well. Stress levels can be checked through various methods, including physiological measurements like heart rate, variability, and cortisol levels, as well as self-report questionnaires like the perceived stress scale. The PSS, I'm not sure if it would be as effective in the sort of pilot industry. Fitness trackers and smartwatches could also be one way to go. What are other ways to measure stress? Well, hormonal testing is one. When people are stressed, adrenaline is released, but it also releases stress hormones into the body, and some of this is discharged in urine. So urine test could be the way to go as well. And so, again, this isn't about blaming pilots, but about making flying safer. And we start by getting real as soon as possible with what's not working. And just as when there are technical issues identified that need to be broadcast industry-wide, issues with mental health, stress and fatigue do too. Essentially in the middle of the peak summer season, when air travel reaches a kind of peak rush hour level, we need to be particularly vigilant in terms of mental health. Does that make sense?
Aviation, which is the regulator, if there is a problem or if there is a failing on their part, and they have in fact been doing that, disclosing issues. And as I understand it, the DGCA's show cause notices, which have been issued now, are related to what Air India has provided them in terms of information. Where flight duty time limitations or the number of hours that pilots and other crew members can work, those guidelines have actually been violated. There have been several concerns in recent times which have been raised by the regulator about FDTL, as it's known, flight duty time limitations. And
Number 3, Turkish Airlines Flight 1951.
In the final moments of the flight, the landing turns into a catastrophe. The plane falls like a rock. The crash of Turkish Airlines Flight 1951 involves the most popular plane on Earth, with nearly 1.5 million passengers boarding 737s every day. Investigators need to figure out if the problem was with the plane or with the pilots flying it.
Do you mind if I give you some homework? I want you to watch this excellent, interesting documentary on Turkish Airlines Flight 1951. Once again, I want you to think about the Air India investigation and the notion of mechanical error versus pilot error within the narrative of that very mysterious crash that occurred near Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport on February 25th, 2009. By the way, I've actually been to that airport myself. I don't want to spoil the results of the investigation, but what Flight 1951 shows is not only why it's important to get to the bottom of these incidents, but also how intricate deciphering the mechanism of the craft can be to the intricacies of the human mind and, yes, human psychology. I also want you to keep this thought, this question in the back of your mind while watching this. How much was stress a factor in this airplane crash? I want to conclude by making a simple observation about Flight 1951. According to Wikipedia, an investigation by the New York Times' Chris Hamby published in January 2020 in the aftermath of the Boeing 737 MAX groundings claimed that the DSB either excluded or played down criticisms of the manufacturer in its 2010 report after pushback from a team of Americans that included Boeing and federal safety officials who said that certain pilot errors had not been properly emphasized. Then in February 2020, it was reported that Boeing had refused to cooperate with a new Dutch review on the crash investigation and that the NTSB had also refused a request from Dutch lawmakers to participate. And what this shows is that the threat to transparency when it comes to investigating these disasters is real. I'm not going to take it further than that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.